Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Lisa. I'm from the AGP office at Winning Pitch, just here to help Barry facilitate the session this morning. I'll pass you over to Barry in a moment. Can I ask you just to pop your microphones on mute for the time being, please, so that we can avoid any interference or background noise. There will be a question and answer session later in the webinar where you can obviously switch this back on and ask your questions, or if you prefer, you can pop them in the chat facility at the bottom there. If you need any support during the webinar, I'll be monitoring the chat. So if you have any problems, please just ask on there. It will be recorded just to help us to collate any questions or comments which may be missed during the live webinar. So if anyone has any questions or concerns about this, please let me know. Following on from this webinar, you will receive 2 emails from myself. We will require you to sign a digital registration form for the Welsh Government. So you'll receive an email from HelloSign, our e-signature platform, with a link to do it. Literally takes less than a minute and really easy to follow. This just allows us to confirm to Welsh Government that firstly the webinar took place and then how many people attended. So we do really need to get your signatures back for this one. You'll also receive an email with a link to 2 surveys to provide feedback to us. So we would please ask you to complete these because we do welcome any feedback to continue to develop the webinar programme and if there's any support that you're looking for during this crisis. So on that note, I will pass you back over to Barry. So thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, folks. So here's a quick look at what we'll talk through this morning. So introduction objectives. I'll then talk about remote working, looking at technology, security, how we behave. Hopefully you can all see me on video. I will turn the video off shortly, and you'll see why I do that as we work through the content. A little bit about the objectives. So first of all, it's to provide you with a set of tips and actions to enable effective remote working within your organisation. And secondly, to enable you to write your own remote working action plan. Why me? So I've been working with remote technology since the early 2000s. I've led teams, I've delivered consultancy, I've run webinars, I've run internal conferences, I've run one-to-one meetings, all over this type of medium. So I've been doing it. The white hair tells you I've been doing it quite a long time. As we work through the presentation, we will cover 3 broad areas: technology and information, security, because you do need to be thinking about the security aspects of remote working, and then we'll look at people and processes. So I'll start off with some technology choices, and I mean there's far too much information on here to read everything out. If you look in the left-hand column where titled technology, I've grouped different technology vendors under different buckets. So we've got conference call, web and video conferencing, webinar conferencing, which is slightly different to this type of meeting, mobile phone and tablet solutions, and then when we go over the page, phone systems and team collaboration. There's a confusing array of remote working technologies out there for you to look at. If we work through the different buckets, conference calls have been around for a long time, tends to be cheap, it's really quick to set up. I know you don't get to do this, you don't get to use the video, you don't get to share documents, but for many instances, actually cheap, quick and easy, really works. I put one vendor in there in the PowerPoint, a company called Powwow Now. I've not worked with them, but they get some good reviews on Google. The second type is web and video conferencing that we're using now. We happen to be using Zoom. There are a wide array of different solutions out there for you. So Microsoft Teams, Google Hangouts, Zoom, WebEx, GoToMeeting. What I suggest you do is look for what you've got available for low cost. So Microsoft Teams is usually included within your Office 365 subscription if you're working with Microsoft applications. Google Hangouts is included within your Google business applications and is free to Google users. And both of those I use regularly and are very good. Zoom is free, with some limitations that you have to be aware of. So, you know, that for today, I presume that we're using a paid for account for today. The key limitation is one-to-one is free. Where you've got 3 or more people on, it's limited to 40 minutes, which in a business environment can be restricting. WebEx is probably my favourite, and that's simply because I work for the company that owns WebEx and I've been using it for probably 15 years now, so I understand it intuitively. There are some free packages available, and it is available at low cost. It is consistently rated by analysts as being the best on the market, and does give you a very wide array of choices in terms of how you use the product. I've then broken out webinar conferencing. So, and the reason I've done this separately is most of the vendors we've looked at, we've just talked through, have limitations in terms of numbers of meetings. So they're usually all right up to about 50 people on a meeting. Or maybe 100 in some cases. With webinar conferencing, I'm thinking where you need to go out and you might have 500 people on the webinar. Then you need a particular conferencing tool, and the one I've included here is WebEx because it's the only one I'm familiar with, but there are other alternatives on the marketplace. If you're using this type of technology in that context, the conferencing tools do give you a different set of features that are for managing very high numbers of attendees. Then we've got mobile phone and tablet solutions. So, you know, anyone with an Apple is probably familiar with FaceTime. But within the family, we've been using FaceTime because I've got a daughter in Killeen. I live in Chepstow. I've got a daughter in Killeen, and then I've got another daughter and a partner up in Manchester. So we've been using FaceTime to stay in touch. WhatsApp works well. It is probably best for one-to-one. When I've tried to do 3 or more people on a WhatsApp video, it gets really clunky, whereas FaceTime runs well. And Skype is free to, you just need a Microsoft account, and Skype works and works fairly readily. Sorry. Press the wrong button there. Right, I'm going to stop using video now. If I can. Now, let me... Sorry about that, technical glitch on my part. So, in terms of more specialist applications, for those of you who are working, who've got phone systems in the company, I mean, I work for myself, so this is my office. It's part of the house. The only other employee within the company is my wife, who does some admin and works on the accounts. You know, I don't need a phone system, but there will be people on the call now who've got, you know, numbers of employees and have a phone system. Several of those have conferencing and video conferencing capabilities, which are either included in what you've already bought, or can be added on for a relatively low cost. So I've included a couple of examples there. Mitel, who are a local manufacturer, 8x8, Cisco and Avaya, all have high quality conferencing capabilities that come with the system. So my suggestion there is that you check with your provider. Ring them up, have a conversation, explain you want to bring in remote working, and I'm sure they will be able to help you. There are also a bunch of other applications available that, because remote working isn't just about doing the video bit and sharing slides. If you've got people who are used to working in a team within an office, they'll be sharing documents, you've got workflows that are moving tasks around, so they need access. They've got documents that they're sharing. They need access to a bunch of other things apart from just the video and web sharing piece. You need to enable your employees to create an office wherever they're working from. And to do that, there's tools like Slack, which is a communication app that's it's not cheap, but it's probably the Rolls Royce on the marketplace, and gives you a wide array of features. Things like Trello help you with workflows and project management. Microsoft Teams includes a range of different tools in there, as well as the video and the chat and the audio. You can store files, you can do workflows in there, so it's quite an elaborate team. And then for file sharing, Microsoft SharePoint and Google Drive both enable you to securely, and the key word there for me is securely, share work and enable different people to work from same documents. The next piece I want to run through is the security concerns. And I've split this into two areas. One is for remote meetings, which we're doing now. And the second one is the broader security concerns. When you move people from working in an office to all suddenly being based from home or wherever they're working remotely, then your security vulnerabilities change. So first of all, we'll look at the meeting bit, and then we'll look at the broader concerns on the next couple of slides. When you use a remote meeting, consider the audience and content confidentiality requirements. So if you're running a board meeting, and you want to make sure that the content you're sharing remains confidential, then you need a system that enables you to do that. Similarly, if you've got someone who is traveling, and you may still well have people traveling, you probably don't want them sharing confidential information while sat in a cafe in a motorway services. Recording requires permission, so when you're on a meeting, less critical internally, but certainly if you've got external people on the meeting, you do need to ask their permission, or inform them that you will be recording and give them the opportunity to opt out. Enabling your teams to use any application may result in content being public. And what I mean by that is it's more secure to say to the team, here's the collaboration tool we are using, please use Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whichever one you use, than allowing them to go to the market and choose anyone. At that point, you've lost control, and your content can be anywhere. Be aware of screenshots of confidential material. People can take screenshots. You're not going to know about it. So if there are confidentiality issues, you need to manage that. Be aware of uninvited guests. There's been Zoom have had a lot of publicity over the last 3 or 4 weeks with security issues. The prime one has been hackers bursting into meetings. So if you've got someone on a call or on the conference session and they're not able to identify themselves, my suggestion is you stop the call, you reset it, and then set up a separate meeting. It's going to take you 2 or 3 minutes, but it will remove that security issue. If you've got someone who you don't want on the call, then you should have the option to eject them from the meeting. And as host, you need to be able to do that. enable the meeting host to control who shares content. So years and years ago, when the technology was really young, I attended quite a large meeting. This was when I was working for a technology company. We had people all over Europe attending this meeting. There was probably 200 or 300. It was in the very early days of web conferences, and it was chaotic, and it was chaotic because the host didn't have the capability to control who was sharing content. So, and all of the packages that I talked about earlier, Microsoft Teams, Google Hangouts, WebEx, Zoom, all enable that capability.
Harry, sorry to interrupt you. Are we moving slides along? I think we're stuck on the specialist applications one. Have you moved along?
Oh, right. Sorry.
Them?
No,
Sorry.
I've moved the slide along. Yeah. Has that not?
Yeah, no, we've got specialist applications in front of us. There we go. It's moved.
Thanks, Lisa.
That's all right. No problem.
So I'll tell you when next time. I'll tell you when I'm moving slide. And do you want me to recover that content now it's there? Or do people get a copy of the slides?
We can send out the slides afterwards. It's not a problem.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that's fine.
Yeah, let's send out the slides. So avoid public areas. I mean, I talked earlier about having someone in a motorway services joining a call with confidential material. But you lose security when you do that. And then finally, ensure meetings have passwords and a meeting number to access. When you join the call this morning, you all had to put a meeting number in and then a meeting password. It helps eliminate people that you don't want to be in attendance. Has that slide changed, Lisa? Lisa?
Sorry, I keep forgetting to unmute myself there.
Yeah.
I've got security concerns, systems and organisation up.
Right. Good. So there's two of these slides. Okay. When you move people, my next door neighbour works for one of the large banks, and he manages a team who work in the commercial banking area. And he's had an office-based team for several years now. And as I was out walking the dog, I was chatting to him when I came back, and he was saying as a large global bank, they've moved forward in terms of remote working more in the last 5 weeks than in the previous 5 years, because suddenly all his team are working from home and are home-based rather than being in the office. That is the type of environment I suspect many of us have been through. And that opens up a series of security vulnerabilities. So the advice I've got for you is research your platform options before deciding. The provider's service availability needs to be up to the task. So small businesses like ourselves, probably less critical. If you're a larger business and you're running large webinars, then availability I would suggest that you research that. Next point is decide if you want to allow personal use of the system. So if you've got employees at home, they may want to use the system to web conference with family. And that's a decision for you as businesses to make, whether you allow that or don't allow that. How is the system encrypted? So Zoom is encrypted from Zoom and WebEx are encrypted from my desktop into the system, and that stops people hacking into the call. There are more expensive systems around that enable you to encrypt the call end to end. So if you've got something that's hyper confidential, there are systems out there that allow you to do that. I'd also suggest you look at if there are any GDPR and security compliance issues for you to manage. So, and by security compliance, I mean if you've got a security certification such as ISO 27001, and that is based on your premises and having people within your offices, suddenly having everyone working externally it will change how you're working, and you may no longer be compliant. So you need to have your compliance person look at that and make some recommendations. And also be aware of any data residency issues for either yourself or your client. So if you're working with certain areas of the UK government, and other public bodies, they have a strong preference for having the data housed in the UK. So if the conference includes sharing data, you need a system where that is kept within the UK. I've just moved slides, Lisa. Has that followed?
Yep, all good.
Right. So, last couple of comments on systems and organisation security concerns for the organisation. Business grade systems provide much stronger security features than consumer products. So, a Microsoft Teams or a WebEx will give you much stronger security features than using consumer Skype or using FaceTime. When you move people from, if you've got people within an office and they're accessing applications that are based on your on servers in your office, and you move them to a home environment, you need to make sure that that connectivity is very secure. So the suggestion there, you're probably going to need some form of VPN. The advice I've got is for you to talk to your IT provider and talk through the options there. But please do not just move people from home and let them just dial in and log on to a system if you haven't checked out that connectivity and made sure it's secure. The reason I put so much security in is whilst we as business people are concerned, are probably all maxed out and working towards making sure our business survives and thrives in the current environment, Mr. Security hacker and cyber criminal just sees this as a vast opportunity. So they have a different perspective on life and are, you know, not really very forgiving. So please do be conservative when you're looking at security issues. You also need to manage device security if your employees are using personal devices. So my daughter, who lives down here, works for one of the finance companies in the area. She accesses she's working from home at the moment, and she's doing that from her own laptop. But she had to take it into IT. Her IT department, the IT department set up the security so that she can work safely from home. Remember, remote working still needs backing up. Right. If you've got people who are used to just saving stuff on the hard disk and it's critical work, the last thing you want is for someone to work, you know, 3 weeks on a critical proposal and then for a hard disk to crash. So think about the basics, and backing up is easy to do, one of those disciplines it's easy to miss. And then finally, the last word on security is please enforce password management. Good password management is one of the first basics and fundamentals of ensuring that you remain secure. So I've moved on to a new slide, Lisa.
Yep, personal behaviour.
Right, so personal behaviour and dress. So when you're using video, the dress bit is only, and behaviour is only relevant when you're using video, as I am this morning. So dress appropriately. This is the first time I've had a proper shirt on for several weeks. So I put the shirt on particularly because I'm presenting this morning. Avoid strong colours and patterns. So I've chosen a shirt that's like blue. It's a neutral colour. It tends to work well with video. Strong colours and patterns can be quite garish over video, so do avoid them. Personal habits are accentuated. So I was providing some remote consultancy a couple of years ago, and it was all done using video. One of the sessions was with this particular person who had quite a tough habit involving his nose and a finger, and I had to sit there for an hour and watch it whilst I was working with him, and it was really unpleasant. It gets very accentuated when you're on video, so please be aware of them and try to manage them. Make eye contact. I've been looking at the camera as we've been talking, so it is a bit odd in video. The way you make eye contact is to look directly into the camera, so please do that. Pay attention. It's easy if you're on, well, A, please you pay attention, and B, be aware that not everyone else is necessarily paying attention. It's easy if you sat at home, you're not engaged with the meeting, to be in the background doing email, and you will hear this sort of noise as people are banging away on their keyboard. Sit or stand. I work standing up, so I've got a standing up desk. I'm stood up at the moment. I find that most comfortable. Other people prefer to sit. The key thing is make sure you're comfortable. And then turn off video after introductions. I know I've not done that today. It's because I'm relatively new to Zoom and couldn't work out how to do that without a delay. But the reason I suggest you do that is it reduces the bandwidth and can improve the quality of the meeting. And the other thing is backgrounds take up bandwidth. So on a one-to-one basis, they're fine. If you've got 10 people in a meeting, they're all using backgrounds. It can really impact the quality of the meeting. And on the right hand side of the screen, the bit highlighted in yellow, I've taken that from a briefing last week from Broward County judges. Broward County is in Florida, and Florida has moved all of its judicial activities online, so judges are now sitting remotely. Everyone has to attend the court remotely, and they published a report last week in which was this clip and asking people to dress appropriately. So the bit in there, and it really made me smile. So the bit in highlighted in yellow is one male lawyer appeared shirtless, and one female attorney appeared still in bed and still under the covers. So, you know, when I talk about dress appropriately, it isn't just myself, and it doesn't. You're not necessarily going to be as in a formal situation like you are with a court, but please be aware that other people are watching you. So I've moved on to the next slide, Lisa.
Yeah, all good.
Right. So. So when you're managing meetings, managing remote meetings is very much the same as managing face-to-face meetings, except everything is accentuated more. So first of all, be early on the session. If you're leading the meeting and you're 5 minutes late, people will be on the meeting and will have gone into email. Right? And at that point, you've lost them. So please be early on the session. Allow plenty of time for the agenda. Typically, to get people engaged in the meeting and effective takes more time when working remotely than working face-to-face. So you need to judge the amount of work you can get through on the agenda. Check understanding regularly. This is why we have the question and answer session at the end of this meeting. If you, this is a webinar, so I'm working through content. It's a little bit different. If you're running a meeting and you want people interacting, please check understanding regularly. When possible, ensure all attendees can contribute. So if you've got 5 people on, you've noticed that one of them hasn't been taking part in the meeting, ask them a question, and get them to give you some feedback. Do keep notes of actions agreed, and do share documents. Sharing documents like this improves the product of meetings exponentially. Managing the environment. So as the slide moved on, Lisa?
Yep.
Right. So the photo on the right is my 2-year-old Labrador. And as you can see from the ripped up toilet roll on the floor, on the carpet there, he's still fairly mischievous. External distractions disrupt the meeting. And not with this particular one, but with our previous dog, I've got no end of different stories where he's come in and distracted meetings. Dedicated work area is optimal. Now, in the current situation where suddenly high numbers of people have gone home to work, not everybody is, you need to be aware that not everybody is going to have a work area. I'm fortunate. I've got an office. This is, my company environment that you can see. It's a spare bedroom that I converted to an office. I've got 2 daughters. Both are now working from home. Whilst they're both now in houses and I've got room to do that, 12 months ago they were both living in flats. Had we gone through this situation 12 months ago, they would have both been in a small flat and trying to work from home whilst their partner was trying to work from home. So be aware that whilst a dedicated work area is optimal, not all of your employees are going to have that capability. Minimize distractions. Dogs, animals. I keep my window over there closed because the neighbours' back gardens are all outside. I don't want someone cutting the grass and the noise distracting me. Close the door. You see my door over there is closed. That cuts down distractions from the family. Lighting conditions can be disruptive to video, so I have some blinds up which I only use when I'm doing this type of event because it stops the light coming in and affecting the video, and make sure other people in the building are aware you are in a meeting. So there's only my wife and myself in the house. Leslie is very much aware that I'm doing this morning and knows to leave me in peace. That's a new slide, Lisa.
Yep.
So managing expectations. Introducing working remotely is a big cultural shift. And leaders and employees need to adapt. So I've been working with an organisation up in Yorkshire and taking them through a fairly big transformation process in terms of developing their IT managed services. On the first engagement that was about 18 months ago, I gave them some feedback in terms of they have a culture whereby everyone needs to be in the office. And they've tried having satellite offices, they've tried having people working from home, and it just hasn't really worked for them. Whilst they implemented, so I gave them some feedback on that because I felt that was going to hinder their ability to recruit people. They and whilst they implemented lots of other of my advice, that was one particular piece that was on the back burner. 4 weeks ago, they suddenly all had to start working from home. So they've had a real culture shock, and actually they're thriving on it. I had a call with them last week about some work I'm doing with them later in a couple of months' time, and they've suddenly realised how powerful it is. So, but it has been a shock to them, and it does take time for people to get used to it. So you need to create a foundation of trust and safety. Be open with people. Not every employee or team member that you've got will enjoy working from home. It does start at the top. You know, you need to set an example and listen to people as well as you know, when you're having a conversation with people, do listen to them. Prioritize meaningful work. It's easy to get distracted at home. Right? If you're used to a close supervision environment and that's no longer in place, you do need to lead people along and make sure they're prioritizing meaningful work. Establish regular rituals. I'm working with a company in Swansea who've been been office based, 40 people in an open plan office. All of them are now working from home, and they've established, I think they're doing 2 meetings a week where they get the whole company on a call and have a chat. Right? There's no business agenda. How are you doing? What we're talking about, and that's working well in terms of keeping people communicating. It's a ritual. It might be if you're used to having, you know, a morning meeting to get teams up and moving, you carry on with the morning meeting, but do it using whichever conferencing tool you've chosen. And ensure people have access to the technology. You can't assume that everyone's been able to get the technology working. Some people are more technology astute than others. And please collect regular feedback. So don't assume it's working because no one's saying anything. There's loads of tools out there to go out and collect feedback from employees. Then I am conscious of time, Lisa, so I'm probably another 5 minutes and then we'll move on to questions.
Okay.
So when you're leading teams, be aware that using the technology to replace the face-to-face changes the leadership dynamic. So you've got some employees will love remote working. Others will find it really difficult. When I worked for a US technology company, I worked from home in Chepstow. The office was near Heathrow. For me, that worked really well and I was productive. I had a colleague do the same job, and he used to drive an hour into the office every day because he just couldn't concentrate at home. So, you know, you need to be aware of those issues and work with people to work through them. So the regular one-to-one sessions are critical. Help people overcome obstacles. When you're sat at home, you can't go have a coffee with your colleague or a chat over the copier machine or whatever. If you've got a problem you're trying to deal with, whatever that might be, it can get blown up out of all proportion. So reach out to people and make them aware if they're struggling to get in contact with you. We talked about rituals on the previous slide. Regular team meetings keep people together, keep them bonded together, and help prevent isolation. And a phone call is often as good as a video. It doesn't need to be video. Right? A phone call on the mobile. People like to talk. Then last couple of slides. Be aware of the risks. So people get isolated, right? Which is why there's such an emphasis through all this content on listening to people and talking with your colleagues and team members. It's easy to get isolated at work when you're working from home. Cybersecurity, we've touched on a lot. Customer expectations. If your customers are used to being able to ring into an office and have the phone pick up really quickly, please explain to them the changes you've made. You've now got your team working remotely. They will be aware of that because of the current situation, but do take the time out to talk that through with them. Employees lacking effective work environment at home, that will happen because we've moved so many people to work from home so quickly. Listen to them, work with them, be understanding and flexible about how they work through. Connectivity might be an issue if suddenly everyone who was working in an office needs to go home and connect to your VPN. There may be capacity issues and security issues with your connectivity. Please get your provider to look at that and sort that out. Keeping focused and motivated, if you're not used to working from home, can be a challenge. That's again why you need to keep, as leaders and managers, keep talking with people, keep people engaged, and encourage team meetings. And then finally, employee burnout. So you will find people who are working from home suddenly find it difficult to turn off. It's really easy to suddenly think, oh, I've been working 12 hours today. So again, in the conversation with my neighbour this morning, in 5 weeks they've experienced that with his team. His team are really inundated at the moment because they're handling companies who are applying for loans under the government scheme. So his team are working really hard, and he's had a couple of instances of people finding that difficult to manage. So do be aware that some employees may just not know how to turn the laptop off and chill out. So when you get the slides, there's a list of references there. I'm not going to go through them, but there were content that helped use to build the slide deck. And then there's a remote working action plan for you to use if you wish. So Lisa, that's my slides finished. Do you want to talk through this, or do you want to move on to questions?
Yeah, it's just a reminder for the forms that we talked about earlier, just getting those back to us as soon as possible, please. Then you can go on to questions now. I've got a couple that have come up on mine that you probably won't be able to see on yours. You okay if I go through those?
Yes, please do.
Okay, so we've got interesting to hear about background using at bandwidth. Are there pop-up stands or equipment available to create bland background backdrop with less bandwidth?
So when I talked about backgrounds, some of the conferencing apps enabled you to put a background in. So I know Zoom in particular enables you to put a background in, and it's that takes up the bandwidth. The background here, my bookcase, doesn't take any additional bandwidth up. I've got a colleague who lives in Vienna, and he works in an open plan part of his house. He has a screen here. So to all intent, he's just got a bland screen with his company logo on, and that works really well. Again, that doesn't take bandwidth up. Okay. Does that answer the question? Hopefully that answers the question.
Okay. So many platforms available. Is it best to develop competency on one or two platforms rather than be driven by other participants if it's your meeting?
Absolutely, yes. So I would suggest as a company, you choose one and stick with it. So my one of preference is WebEx. I tend to work with lots of others simply because all my clients work with different tools. But as a company, choose one, get people competent on it, and that will pay you back in abundance.
Fatigue is a big issue when managing meetings online. What would a sensible rhythm look like?
For me, it's 90 minutes and take a break. because I don't know who asked the question. It is a really good one actually, and I'll include that in the content. So I often run full day consultancy sessions, and I'm quite disciplined. It's 90 minutes, take 15-minute break, 90 minutes, take a 15-minute break, and then next one is a longer break, because you are very right, it is quite fatiguing and intense working online.
Okay, that's the questions that I've got. And I don't know if anybody wants to come off and mute their microphones and ask any questions.
Yeah, hi. Good morning.
Good morning.
Andrew?
Yes, Andrew. Good morning, Barry and Lisa. Yeah, great. You know, the satisfying thing for me listening to you is that on the last section where you listed those 5 pointers in terms of working from home, I'm pleased to say we're probably covering them all in as you've listed, so that's very good. The question I have though is when, for example, we've got before the actual employees were furloughed, they started working from home for 2 weeks leading up to that point, and that was about 2 weeks ago now. And in doing so, it worked well, but I realised obviously that the setup that they required with double screens, suitable chairs and tables, would be needed as good as if you'd be in the office itself. So they actually transferred all of this stuff over, including the table, including the chairs and the kit and the double screens and everything. So I can see great benefits from continuing this remote working after this lockdown, especially for those people. But the issue will be we'll probably have to double up with kit, because there'll be occasions when they'll have to come back into the office and work from there in the team environment, which is, with all due respect, I mean, as best as we can, we have done really well using this system. We use Zoom. We did prioritize and we got a lot of work done when we targeted the work. We did have regular meetings twice a week to plan and review. But I can see that, if they're coming away from their home base to work back in the office, then we'd either have to invest in doubling up on the kits there. So that's one issue. And the other issue then is covering the costs of the Wi-Fi costs at home and everything else that goes with it. So we've not discussed that one actually, but here at home with me, I'm working in the kitchen at the minute, and my daughter and son-in-law working for my business and for another business are working outside in an office, and we have little pack that, this Wi-Fi, I can't remember what it's called now, this little transmitter that can be taken with you, and that's worked really well as well. But there's a cost issue as well. So those are the couple of things that I was going to ask you to see whether you had any ideas on those.
Yeah, no, and that's a really good question, Andrew, because there is and I've made some notes on. I'll put each of those in the content actually. So thank you for asking that. In terms of whether or not I think you've obviously been quite generous in terms of providing kit for people working at home, and I think that's brilliant. That's absolutely the right thing to do. Not every organisation is going to be in a position to do that. So I think it is, as I said earlier, that having the right working environment at home is critical. Whether that's standing up like me or having the right... I do have an office chair. You probably can't see it. It's full of storage at the moment because I have to clear the desk out. But I have a good office chair that I bought. It is, if you've got employees sat at home working, you don't want them really sat at a dining table on a dining chair, because that can lead to back issues. You want them working in a safe environment. And by safe I mean comfortable, as comfortable and safe as it is in the office. How that is funded is for the company and the organisation to work through. What I would suggest is when remote working was first available 15 years ago, the technology company I was working for at the time, Cisco, I was part of a team that was working on introducing the technology. We worked with a lot of councils in the UK who found once they'd introduced remote working, the payback they got was it released office space. So
Yeah.
they needed whilst they invested money in bandwidth and providing people with chairs and other work, as you say, 2 screens, the payback they got was if they were expanding, they didn't need to take on more office space, or they could actually, in several councils, just release buildings.
Yeah, it's exactly what we found just before this lockdown. We were about to move our design team into a different office, adjoining building, detached from our building. Probably would have cost at least several hundreds of pounds a month. But that never came about then because of the changes that were forced upon us. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's ways you can do it. So you can have you might people might want to work 2 days in a week in the office and 3 days at home, and you can sort of shift people around so that you've got a mixing group of people in the office, and that works. Lots of companies do that. That works really well.
Yeah, I think it's refreshing this system, this method now, because the fact that we've all been going to work for 5 days a week, 8 till 5, call it that, because it was what we always did, has now been disrupted because of this lockdown, and has made us rethink how we should be working and have a better, have a better lives for one another. Because we don't have much breakout space in our office that we would have liked, and if most of our people live in the rural community, out in the rural space, they can work, taking, maybe an hour, have a break, and then they're far more productive. And we've seen that on the work list that we asked our people to try and get through, and they got through them all, which I think would have taken an extra week if they'd have been in the office, to be honest with you.
I completely and absolutely agree with you. It's, and that's a brilliant learning curve you've been through there, Andrew.
Yeah, that's good. What about, sorry, could you mention about the cost then? How would, obviously we should be covering that as well. We should be looking at that in order, because they can be costing them more on the Wi-Fi usage, etc., electricity, lighting.
So in an ideal world, I would say yes. I think that's down to each company and their employees to agree. But
one thing I could say is that by not paying or not having to pay people to travel to work, if you like, then that could be offset against the extra costs of this Wi-Fi and power, lighting, space, furniture, etc.
Oh yeah. So before I send the slides out, would it be helpful if I put in an additional slide on the business case?
Yes, absolutely. That'd be good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll do that. That won't take me long. So I'll put an additional slide on the business case. The benefits you tend to get are, first of all, people are typically more productive. 2, you cut down on travel expenses and travel time. Often you cut down on delays, people being late. If stuck in traffic, doesn't happen when you just have to walk across your hallway and go into an office. But the productivity bit, it can be immense. The other big one is the office space we talked about. You physically need less office space if half your team are working from home. So that can, depending on how you finance your offices, that can either save you the cash or enable you to lease out some part of the office to someone else. So that's a big saving. On the investment side, you've got the cost of the technology, you've got the cost of providing people with working environments at home. Some larger companies go to the extent of having health and safety reviews of people's working environments. That tends to be dependent on how much I did talk about distractions. Sorry about that. That was Leslie. We're talking about costs. Some larger companies will go to the extent of having a home health and safety check. That isn't necessary, but some people do. But overall, in my experience, once people have bought into remote working, they don't go back.
Excellent. Thank you.
I've got two more coming up on my screen. Businesses will have a huge opportunity to recruit the best staff globally. These organisations traditionally in more rural parts of Wales have struggled. Will this change recruitment strategy?
So yes, so I've worked over the last 20 years. I've done lots of work with BT, and they recruit the best person they've got, regardless of where they are in the UK. And because the BT bought into home working a long time ago, if you're if you're in a remote village in Wales, you're up in mid Wales somewhere, and you're the work you do can be done remotely. So let's say you're a software developer, you can work for anyone. There are a number of companies in the technology world. I don't know what businesses you're all in. The one particular company called GitHub produce a particular type of technology used in software development, and I don't think they've got any offices. All of their people work remotely, and they've got several hundred employees scattered right the way across the world. Does that answer the question?
Will the recruitment strategies change with that?
Yes, it does. And the recruitment strategy will change in a couple of ways. One is your HR people need to be able to recruit people remotely. So if you can't get people in and do a face-to-face interview, you need to be comfortable that your recruitment process handles remote working. So that's number one. And there are companies around who with specialist video applications for recruitment. So I'm not an expert on that area, but the answer is yes, and that would need some research in terms of suggesting how they do that.
Okay, and does a blend of working from home and a central hot desking facilities work well?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I mentioned BT earlier. They, in their central offices near St. Paul's, they've got about 2,500 desks. Their daily working population, when I worked with them, was about 8,500 people. They had a constant flux of people coming in and working for 2 hours, then going out and seeing clients. So the mix of working at home and coming into a hot desk, when you're organised, when people have gone through that culture change, that works really well.
Can I interrupt and ask another question, Lisa, or you got something else to ask?
That's fine.
Barry, what I was going to say was we've also found that. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Sorry. We also found that with our people, we use a special software. So when you're in the office environment, it can be run off the servers and so on. But if you with more remote working, there would effectively have to be more investment in standalone systems, as we see it, to make it work. Because I mentioned the design earlier, but we've also got project planning and costing systems and so on. So therefore, whereas somebody could just hot desk and jump onto a system in the office, if they're working from home, they're going to have that system loaded onto their own computer.
Yeah, there are ways around that. So, have you heard of the concept of a virtual desktop?
Yes. Yeah.
So there are two. Have you got a company? Do you do your own IT, or have you?
No.
Right.
We outsource that.
Right.
Sorry.
What a virtual desktop does, it allows your people at home to access your applications typically through any browser. So it gives you a very secure way of remote people working, because all of the files and the content is sat on your server.
The only issue, I'm sorry to interrupt, is that some of this software is so large in terms of data and data libraries that sit behind it, that it runs too slow over even fast Wi-Fi. So it normally needs to be loaded onto individual desktops or laptops and so on.
All I can say there is, Andrew, is talk with your IT provider, because it suddenly gets quite complicated. Virtual work, what a virtual desktop does, the application is actually sat on your servers, and the person at home is just accessing that through a browser. And that works really well for the majority of applications. But without understanding what application, and I'm not an expert in virtual desktop working, so which is why I say please talk to your IT provider.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, anyone else with any questions? Do you want to come off and mute? Or are we all good? I think that might be it, Barry.
Cool. Well, thank you for your questions, folks. That's it makes my job much easier when I get questions. Thank you.
Cheers, Barry. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, folks. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you, Lisa. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.